I guess I had always known that Mashapaug was an Indian name. Although we never called it Mashapaug, we always called it Mash.
There was an Indian town of Mashapaug. Well, that was right around the Mashapaug Pond. That area remained an area that was attractive to Native peoples. You have a lot of people in Providence area who had Pequot and Mohegan ancestry as well as Narragansett. It was like the Indian town from the original Indian town that was there that the settlers felt needed to be moved. Reconstituted itself, in a sense.
In the 1800s, there was loads of ponds all over Providence. All that area around Ford's Elementary School, Buckland Street, that was all swamp and ponds. And ponds in the other areas of the city were filled in for roads, houses, everything else.
Back in the 1904, they used to have horse racing on the ice. And there was a private owner of Mashapaug Pond. He gave permission for the people to have their horse racing after he harvested his ice. And after he would get his blocks of ice out of there, then he would say, okay, the rest of the pond is open to you folks.
At the turn of the century, of the last century, that was a big recreational place. They had swim races there, swimming lessons, meets. They had sailboat rentals and canoe rentals and everything.
And my mother and father used to tell me that the churches, predominantly minority churches, back in the 40s, they used to baptize people there in the Mashapaug Pond.
I was born in the Mashapaug Pond area in 1945, and I lived approximately 150 yards from the pond. And the childhood up there was a middle-class neighborhood, an awful lot of boys and girls my age to play with and grow up with down around there. And we spent a lot of time at Mashapaug Pond.
Opposite Gorham's, across the pond, there was another little settlement between Niantic Avenue and the pond. And I don't even know if it had a name, but the streets were unpaved, and it was sort of like, craftsman-built houses, cabins and shacks and whatnot. And they were basically poor white people, or at least what was called colored people back at that time. And so we just knew that. We never went over there. We knew that there were lots of colored kids that lived over there, and that was about it.
When you crossed over the Calhoun Avenue Bridge, over the railroad tracks, over to where the industrial development is all now, it was mostly people of color. Most of them all had some Indian ancestry. It was all more rural. There were trees. Jonathan Street, where my cousin lived, that was dirt road. It was naturally appealed to Native people because our people always lived close to the earth.
I've been born and raised in Providence, and particularly that area. We used to call it West Ellenwood. People were from all over. We had people from Ireland, Cape Verde Islands, Africa, Italy, from Italian, naturally Afro-American families, which my family is. All of us kids got along, and you did something wrong, you didn't get away with it because everybody knew each other.
Yeah, the pond was always there. It kind of loomed large in our lives. And I'd always heard these wonderful rumors that there were caves down by Gorham's, that maybe the Indians had lived in there, and it was, at that age, you're 12, 13 years old, you're saying, oh my God, I'd love to see that, but you never did quite get to see them, probably because they didn't exist, and also you're a little nervous of getting a little too far away from home and not knowing what you were getting into.
And when the summertime come, when the weather was getting warm, we'd bunk school. We'd go down there and take our clothes off and go in the water and swim, and that was Mashapaug Pond.
We used to come up here and fish, and we'd build rafts, and, every once in a while we'd swipe a set of sheets off a clothesline and make sailing rafts and everything like that, and go swimming and everything else in there. So it was a wreck place.
Yeah, people skated. Again, you had to be careful with that because of the springs that came in and really never froze over. So there were spots that if you weren't careful, you could go right through. And again, I was never much of a hockey player, so I skated around, but I stayed towards the middle. But I am some of the people who just skate right across from one to the other. It was a real adventure.
And we would get very thirsty. In those days, they didn't have bottled water around. So during the hockey games, we would break holes in the ice and we would sip the water. And And in the following spring, when we'd be over by the pond, we'd be looking at the water and it would have this green color. And we'd think back to the winter when we were drinking that water. And we used to say, geez, you know, it didn't taste too bad, but something's wrong here.
I never swam very well, so I was always a little intimidated by it, and especially a lot of the guys my age, a little bit older, would go over there and get 6-packs. I get somebody older to buy them some beer, and they'd get a little tipsy, and you had to be careful. You weren't the one who went for a swim.
We used to go over there and smoke our first cigarettes, and we'd take beers over there, and we weren't supposed to. It's a good place to hide, so a lot of kids in the neighborhood hung around over there.
Yeah, you know, and then as I said, when people got into the transistor radios and rock and roll and were love struck, oftentimes that would be a place to go and hang out with your sweetheart there for a while. And it was a multi-purpose pond, and God knows what's inside it.
Well, a lot of the stories go, if you ever went into Mashapaug Pond, took a close look, there'd be a lot of automobiles in there. Some people in the neighborhood were in the automobile removal business, which is now known as Grand Theft Auto. And if they stole a car and they wanted to get rid of it and have that person collect insurance, some people would just, you know, drive it in the pond or leave it there. People that had junk cars wanted to get rid of them, right into the pond. And we often used to kid about it, you know, if we ever went scuba diving or in there, what we would find.
Every year at St. Michael's, you'd hear about some kid that would drown, like in Roger Williams Park or Mashapaug Pond or something. One that went out skating, fell through, and they lost them. So they sent police divers out, fully covered, fully, not an ounce of skin or anything showing anywhere with the gloves. And they found 2 55-gallon drums on there. And they rolled them over to see if he got pinned underneath there. Nothing under there. I saw the police report, and they were out of work for, I believe it was 5 days, because they had some sort of bizarre rashes, stuff like that, lumps growing all over them. So, I mean, there's something, but I'm not a chemist.
People being concerned about the environment is something relatively new. I mean, it wasn't really till the 1970s that people even started to pay attention to the environment and clean air and clean water. You know, and before that, the things that Gorhams did with just dumping everything into the soil on their property was just the way things were done back then. Nobody cared or really understood what they were doing.
When you go to the Gorham site now, it just seems so benign, you know? It's just, you can't see the contamination. It's not like a big yellow radioactive something or other.
Well, they never had all the signs up there that they have now. Wear gloves, wear boots, do not take fish home. They've got caution signs, I think, in at least 2 different languages. And entrance to it is pretty well restricted. But, I mean, you walk right down there anyway. And it's like when they were going to build the school down here and everyone was up in arms about it. Well, we're going to put a fence around it. Let me see, a kids, water, a fence. So where is the part that's going to stop them? You know, that's not going to stop them. And obviously the fish aren't edible, but there's some monsters that grow down there.
I see people trying to fish in there. I think we should have more sign around the lake. That was something we'll be fighting with the city about it. There should be more sign that people knows and more visible.
We love the pond. We got a lot of use out of the pond. Plus, we love just the quietness, the peacefulness of the pond. We're up kind of on a hill above the pond, so you can look out and you can see the pond. And my backyard goes right down to the waterfront, and it's just so nice on a Sunday morning. Get your coffee and go out on the porch, and all the birds are out there, and there's eagles, there's herons, there's all kinds of wildlife around there. It's so great to be living in a city and you have all this wildlife, all this diversity.
We had a normal life like anybody else, go to work, come home. You know, when it's summertime, we had a nice yard with the lake. Unfortunately, it's contaminated, but it's a nice view.
So Mashapaug Pond, having the water there and having the land where you could raise your own crops, as our people did, you know, because we were agricultural people initially, and all of those things were able to be maintained there. So that's why the pond provided all of that. back then. And that's what makes it such a tragedy to see the way none of those things are possible now.
Well, I hope someday, before I die, to swim in that pond.